Hi, my name is Donna from Gailavira Jewelry, and today I'm going to show you how to make these woven swirly ear cuffs. The first thing we need to do is make a template. Now I've found that the size that seems to fit the most people for ear cuffs is 28 millimeters, or about 1 1/8 inch. So the first thing we're going to do is mark the starting point, and then mark it again at 28 millimeters. And then we need to mark the middle, so that way we can make sure everything's centered properly. And that'll be at 14 millimeters, right there. Now, of course, if you already know that you prefer a larger or smaller size for ear cuffs, you can just base your template on whatever size you prefer. Just make sure you have a mark at the beginning and the end for the length, and then one in the middle. Okay, now I'm just going to make those marks a little bit bigger, longer. And then just draw a line through all of them. I'm starting with two pieces of 20 gauge wire that are about 7.5 inches long. I'm using dead soft wire because it's easier for me, and it'll harden up well enough as I'm working. But if you prefer half hard, that's okay too. Full hard would definitely be too hard for this. Okay, now I need to find the center of the wire. Since this is 7.5 inches, I need to go for 3 3/4 inches. That's right there. Doesn't have to be exact though. Now what you want to do is hold on to that part there and just bend them together. Just be careful as you bend that the wires stay lined up with each other. You don't want them crossing over each other in this part of the loop. Now we need this a little bit tighter, so what we're going to do, let this set of wires cross over the other ones, but still holding it tight here so it doesn't cross over in that area. And just make that loop sort of a little bit smaller. At this point, hold it in one hand, take this wire and move it up, then this wire, move it down a little bit so the two sets are parallel to each other. I need to reshape that just a little bit over here. Okay. Now here's where the template comes in. Line the end of the loop up on the first mark. Hold it in place with one hand, and with the other hand, the last mark here, you just want to make sure when you move these wires, it doesn't go any farther in than that mark there. Okay, and that's the full width of the ear cuff right there. Now what you have to do is take the wire that's on the inside of the loop. Okay, and that's the wire that you're going to attach the weaving wire to first. Now I'm starting with about 3.5 feet of 28 gauge dead soft round wire for this. And just put it close to where the two wires start to come together and wrap it about 3 or 4 times, and that's just to secure it. I'm going to do one more wrap there. Okay. Now you take the wire and set it back inside the other wire. You may have to adjust this a little bit because the thickness of the weaving wire can kind of make it come apart a little. So you just have to adjust it until the wires go back together a little bit. And from here you're going to be treating each set of wires as if it's one wire. And we're going to do a figure 8 weave. And that's just going around one wire and then up around the other wire, passing in between each time. Okay, so you're going to wrap the bottom wire twice and then the top wire twice. And go back underneath the bottom wire, and you just keep repeating the same pattern. And we'll do this until we get to about here, about right there. And as you work, you have to be careful that these wires stay lined up correctly, because you don't want them crossing over and getting woven on top of, because that'll make it uncomfortable. You also need to push the weave back onto itself to keep it nice and tight. At this point, you've woven as far as you need to. So we're just going to separate these wires a little bit and start coiling over the inside wire right here. And as you coil, you want to try and make sure you keep it nice and even and tight. You just kind of keep pushing it up against itself like you did with the weave. Alright, you don't want to go too far just yet because you don't want to go past the point where you need. It's just easier to coil it before moving on to the next step. Alright, so here you just want to bend it down until it kind of goes a little bit past it, then bring it back up, shaping it to go along with the curve here. I want to continue that coil just a little bit farther before weaving the top portion. coil right about the middle. So here's where the template comes in handy again. You line up both ends, and you see where that little mark is right there? That's where you need to keep coiling up to. So I need just a couple more wraps for this one. Okay, and there you can see it's lined up. Let me zoom in on that a little bit for you. Okay, you can see where it's lined up right there with that line. At this point, we need to trim these wires. So hold them together. It needs to be 3/4 of an inch past this part. So you just put that up to the edge of the ruler and measure out 3/4 of an inch, which is right about there. Then go ahead and clip that. Now you need to take your round nose pliers, and you're going to make a spiral out of this top wire here. You don't want a real tight spiral, you want it a little bit open. But you want to keep it as smooth and even as possible. And that should be centered right over the end of the coil. Now take the other wire and bend it around the outside of that spiral. Then just pull that out a little bit there. Now what you need is to separate them just enough to weave between them. And we're going to do the same figure 8 as we did right here. First we'll start just doing it exactly the same, 2 wraps around each wire. As we get to the curve, that will change a little bit. Okay, now as we get up to the curve, what's going to happen is because this wire is actually longer than the spiraled wire, the section that's going to be woven, it's going to end up leaving gaps if we keep with the same weave. So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch to 2 wraps on the outside wire and then 1 wrap on the inside wire. And that'll make up for the extra length. You're going to keep weaving until you get just to this point right here where they start to separate a little too much. Okay, at this point you're going to do 2 wraps around the spiraled wire. Then you're just going to coil the rest of the wire for this part. And you want to stop maybe 2 to 3 millimeters away from the end of the 20 gauge wire. And to finish off the wire, you snip the 28 gauge wire as close as you can to the 20 gauge. But you'll be careful not to actually scratch up the 20 gauge or cut it. Okay. And to make sure it stays put, you just kind of burnish the wire down with your pliers. Just make sure you rotate the pliers in the same direction you were coiling. Okay, check it to make sure there's nothing sticking up. At this point, you can do the same here. It's a little bit more difficult to get the pliers into this spot though. So if all you can do is just kind of press it in, that should be okay too. Now you're going to make another spiral, a smaller spiral, with this wire. Okay, if you need to, you can bend this up a little bit into place if it doesn't look like it's positioned well enough. Next, what we need to do is separate this outside wire a little bit first, and we need to cut it. We're going to go about 1/2 inch. It doesn't have to be exact, but as close as possible would be good. And this wire, we're going to kind of bring it up a little bit and then curve it around so it matches the shape of this wire, the center part. And that we need to cut about 14 millimeters past the end of the loop. That's right there. Okay. Now I'm going to take a piece of 28 gauge wire that's about 1.5 feet long. I'm just going to coil from here all the way to about 2 to 3 millimeters away from the end. And remember, as you do the coiling, you want to keep the wraps as close as possible to each other. And if you need to, you can just use your fingernails to push it closer together. And as you work, you can keep pushing the coil over. And that'll make it easier instead of trying to coil around that curve. once you have enough on here, just go ahead and push it all the way. It might help if you open this up a little bit. Just push it into place. Then you can go ahead and move this wire back to where it belongs and finish coiling. And now we're just going to go ahead and finish off the two tail wires on this the same way we did for the upper portion. Then take your round nose pliers again and make a spiral at the bottom of the ear cuff. And come over to this little wire here, bend it so it shapes around that, and then make a small loop. Now bring your template back over here. You want to make sure the spiral here and up here is all centered. And that looks pretty well centered to me. Now you need to shape the ear cuff. What I do is I hold it upside down. Now I'm going to make a right ear cuff. So I'm using double barrel Wubbers, the round ones. These are the large pair. I'm using the smaller barrel to shape the ear cuff because it's more of an oval, not so much round. Keep it lined up perpendicular to the pliers. Don't put too much pressure on them. If you put too much pressure on it, then you can end up damaging the weaving wire. And just kind of curl it around a little bit. Now sometimes it's a little bit stubborn and doesn't want to curl right at the very end, so you just have to use needle nose pliers and give it a little bit more of a curl. And flip it over and do the same on the other side. Now sometimes this little loop wants to get pushed in there. Just kind of pull that out a little. Make sure everything is still lined up properly. Now that's probably not closed well enough to hold on to an ear. So we're going to do the same thing we did on the first side. We're going to use the needle nose pliers, except this time we're going to kind of pull it into place a little bit. Okay, and that's about what it should look like. Now if you do need to adjust it to put it on, you just kind of wiggle your finger in there and that'll open it up a little bit. I do recommend only doing a little tiny adjustment at a time, then trying it on, but don't try to make adjustments while you're actually wearing it because you can hurt yourself that way. Now I'm going to make a charm to hang from that little loop on the back of the ear cuff. I'm just using a little glass leaf charm, but you can use crystals, teardrops, pretty much anything, as long as it's small enough and not too heavy. I'm just going to do a simple wrapped loop for this one. Put the wire through, maybe about 3/4 of an inch hanging out. Bend both wires up. You just want it to kind of bend up a little bit on the longer wire, then you can wrap the shorter wire around it a couple of times. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm using about 4.5 inches of 24 gauge wire for this. You just keep those wraps nice and tight and even. And let's go ahead, after you get, I think I did about 4 or 5 wraps on there. You can go up as far as you want to though, as long as you have enough wire for it. Okay, just want to snip that right there. And press that real close and tight. Now for the top part of the loop, okay, we need the loop sort of facing forwards. So if you look at the whole of the loop, it would actually be coming out sideways. So you're going to bend it backwards, and bringing it up over the top of the round nose pliers. And center that loop over the top of that coil. Now for this next part, I'm going to hold that loop with my needle nose pliers. And the reason you do this, if you were to hold it with the round nose pliers and put too much pressure on it, you could end up damaging the wire and it would make a weak spot. It could break. So you do it this way so there's no weak spots in the wire. I'm just going to wrap that wire all the way down over the top of the first coil that I made. Snip that close. And again, we're going to use needle nose pliers to push the end of that wire down. Just kind of tuck it in as close to the first coil as possible. And run your finger over that to make sure you can't feel it sticking up anywhere. Because if that brushes against someone's skin, it can be very uncomfortable. Or it could even get caught on somebody's hair. And that's not fun either. Now what we need to do, we're going to open this little loop the same way you would open a jump ring. Hold it with your pliers and kind of twist it open a little bit. You don't need to open it a lot, just enough to get the charm into there. Then go ahead and close it the same way you opened it, basically, just twisting in the opposite direction. And there it is. Now you would put this on, just kind of see that little opening there, put it over the edge of your ear, and then you kind of twist it and pull down just a little bit. And there you have it.